Okay, so we are going to do a centering and throwing demonstration again. Sitting down, working on the wheel, making sure that we have the right posture, that our legs are wrapped around the wheel, that our elbows are tucked into our rib cage or into our knees, and that we have a bucket of water that is full, that we can submerge our hands completely into is really important. As you can see here, make sure that your pedal is underneath your foot or easy to access with your hand if you're throwing on a table. Let's turn that wheel on once that clay has been adhered to the surface, and you're going to start to have that clay spin around in circles. So it's a lot more work than you think it is to get that clay centered. It looks so simple and easy. Make sure that those elbows are tucked into your thighs, and that again you're using the palm of your hand and your thumb to really bear down on the clay. Your pinkies need to tuck underneath the clay as well. And as you can see, my clay is pretty uncentered, right, as I'm wobbling around. So instead of chasing the clay around, I'm centered in my body. So I need the clay to follow my core. So I'm going to bear down on the clay, and I'm going to comb. So I'm going to push that clay in my hands upward, and as you can see, it's starting to get that comb. And do you see at the bottom here, I've got all this residual clay. I'm going to use the side of my finger to scrape that off, because as I call it, the table surface, your wheel head, is like your work area. And you want to keep that nice and clean and free of any kind of clay lumps or bumps so you can be centered easier. So from here, I'm going to do one more coning, very simple. And then from the top, I'm going to take the power of the meat of my thumbs, and I'm going to push that clay back down, work my way down, spreading my hands apart a little bit. So my hands are in this like heart shape or C shape. Nobody's hands should be locked like a penguin, right? You want to open that up. You want to cover the full circumference of the clay between your thumb over the top, your hand across the side, and your pinky kind of tucking underneath to create that mushroom shape. And I know I keep emphasizing that mushroom shape because a mushroom shape allows for your hand not to rest on the wheel head. If you're resting your hand on the wheel head and you're spinning around and this looks like a little volcano or like a chocolate kiss, your hands are going to start to bleed. So we really want to elevate that by creating this beautiful little mushroom, little squatty mushroom. Okay, so I'm off centered, right? I just knocked it off. And then I bear down on the clay, get centered, and I know the clay is centered because the wheel is spinning and it is no longer moving when I touch it, right? Like when I touch my hands on the sides, my hands are completely still. They're still here as they are in my body. And sometimes the clay can be centered at the top but still be off at the bottom. So make sure that you're kind of really wrapping your hands around and that everything is completely focused on you. Because at this step, very often beginners chase the clay around kind of in a circle. I call it hula hooping, where you just kind of like are following it around trying to catch up. And it's really about moving in on the clay and stopping it from moving to your own stillness, if that makes sense. So once we're still, once we're centered, now we want to open. So the way that I teach my beginners is you're going to take your thumbs, not side by side, but where the nails actually kiss. And we're going to push down the center. And you're going to do this with confidence and gusto so that you have it straight like a core, where there is no swirling or looping happening. So right now we've got this lovely little hole inside of here. And then from there, you're going to take your hands, like hold them like a butterfly. So your instinct is going to be to spread your thumbs apart. Don't do this because you have one dominant hand, so it will throw it off. So holding your hands like a butterfly, you're going to put your least dominant hand outside, take your fingers to the inside of the clay, and you're going to squeeze outward to the outside wall. So let's do that now. And through this whole time, I'm moisturizing my hands with water so that nothing sticks. So I've got this nice opening that I've just created with opening the walls. And now I'm going to compress the inside of the shape, get it nice and steady. And now this is the actual throwing. So the throwing I'm actually doing on the right side of my form. I'll try to do it a little bit in front. Some people throw in front of themselves or on the side. If you're left-handed, you would be having your wheel in reverse, and you'd be throwing on your left side, okay? So if you are right-handed, you put your left hand on the inside, right hand on the outside. I like to throw with my fingers with a sponge, where things are really well, pressed up against that edge, using the tips of our fingers. Nobody should be throwing with the whole circumference of their hand, because after a while you'll only be able to throw the height of your hand. So it's all about throwing with the fingers, not with the palm of the hand. So I'm going to lean in here using my fingertips. I'm starting to apply pressure evenly on both sides, and the walls begin to rise. Compress my rim, and I'm going to do the same thing again. Going back down to the bottom, compressing the clay, and you can see that the clay is moving, and it is going straight up. And as we've talked about before, if I apply too much pressure with that inside hand, I'm going to end up with a bowl. If I apply too much pressure with the outside hand, it's going to move in like a bottle. So it's important that as I'm working, I work steady up the walls, and that I don't go too fast, because if I go too fast, I'll create a spiral. And if I go too slow, I'll cut a hole into the side of my mug, right? So this is becoming too tall. This is too much clay. So I'm going to show you guys another little trick. That, let's say the top of your cup gets really thin or it's uneven. There's this thing that you can do. You take your least dominant hand, make sure it's nice and moist, and you're going to hold it, the clay, with your least dominant hand. You're going to take your needle tool, and you're just going to gradually slice into it and then pull it off. Right? So I was able to take off some of that excess clay. Again, keep that clay for later. I'm going to go back in. And right now, my cup is probably a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch thick. And it's really important that we are getting all of that clay down in the bottom corner. This is the problematic spot. Nobody wants to throw down here. This is like the danger zone. Everybody likes to throw up here, so our pots get really nice and thin because our hands can touch. But when they're down in the bottom, everybody's super nervous down there, right? So that's what we want to avoid. So just like we talked about before, you're going to take that wooden rib, which for some reason I can't find mine. Oh, there's another one. Okay. So I'm going to take my wooden rib, right? And remember, pointed tip down is the way that I like my students to work. And you're going to come in and undercut this by scraping away some of that excess clay to give it a slight taper. Clean up that edge along the wall. Compress the lip with your fingertips as you're working, because you don't want any sharp edges, right? And then from here, you apply a little bit of water onto the surface, because this is the trick to get the pot off the wheel head, right? We take our wire tool, slide underneath, 1 time to release it, 2 times to actually get it to move. And the second time actually gets it to move. And if it doesn't happen the second time, do it a 3rd or a 4th time. Alright, so with this guy, because I've already had a little bit of success, right, I'm going to come in and I'm going to show you what your pots need to look like inside. Come on, break open. So on the inside of our mug, we need the walls to be the same all the way up, right? Do you guys see that? So very often what happens in beginners is they forget to do the third step. So first step is opening. Second step is creating the floor. No, I'm sorry. First step is centering. Second step is creating the opening. Third step is creating the floor, opening it wide to get that nice flat 90-degree angle. Often people just open and then start pulling up the walls, and so they get these little tubes. And so the clay is really thick at the bottom and then thin at the top. We want to create this space to create volume for liquid, okay? So make sure that all happens when you're throwing, okay? So that is how a beginning throwing mug should work from a side view. I'll do another demonstration where you will see a top view of the same demo.